Sefer Higayon, we've reached a milestone. We've actually finished the first two major portions of the Sefer. The first being Asika Higayon, where he explains what the basic foundations of thinking are, concepts and the various concepts and the levels of conception. Then we've gone through the various Chelke Higayon. He explained all the terms, 21 terms, explained statements, and finally we're doing Hekashim syllogisms and how to build them and how to destroy them. Today we're going to do a very important part of the book, which is Seder. He's now going to put the whole symphony together, and he's going to teach us how to present material when we're teaching others, or how to analyze material when we're trying to learn about any topic. We found when we published the book, we were looking for a certain problem that the Ramchal left out in the manuscript, and we discovered the Hekesh Kanafim, in which he's actually going to go through all the 21 types of terms, and he's going to build syllogisms for us, and he'll also analyze syllogisms with them, and he'll build statements and analyze statements, which is the four basic processes that he's using this book for. One is to create new ideas, either statements or hekeshim, and the other one is to analyze ideas that already exist, much like we did in Derek Tfunos. So this is a very important milestone, and I cannot say that I'm a master of the Sefer. I'm only presenting the information, and I'm quite awed by the Ramchal's system, because he really has a very clear system of analysis and presentation. So we'll read it, and we'll understand it, and then Bezrat Hashem will be able to apply the principles. Okay. Let's look at our chart here. Just one more second. Just the last part of the book. We did, as we said, we did concepts and Chelke Higayon, and now we're into Seder. And he's going to break it up, as I mentioned, into how to learn about information, how to present it, and then how to analyze information, whether that information is statements or syllogisms. So we'll go through this whole part. And there's a lot here, and there's a lot more than was actually written in the chart, and maybe we'll add to the chart. Okay, let's first see the Sefer itself, okay? So, where did we leave off? Oh, I was in a complicated sharim. I was doing some work there. Okay, so this is chapter 23, and it's a chapter on Seder, which is his method of presenting material and analyzing material. So he says like this: Ad heina ba'arnu hahekesh. That was the last thing we discussed in the Chelke Higayon. Ata nivar haseder. Now we'll tell you about the method or the order of analysis. Vohu, what is seder? Vohu ma shebo nisadrim chelke halimud kahogon. I'm sorry. It's the principles upon which we organize what we have studied properly. Lefi madrugesam, according to their proper level. V'yischalek leklali uleprati. There's two types of Seder he's going to talk about: general and particular. And he'll, as usual, the Ramchal will define all his terms. What does it mean, klali and prati? Perisho, haseder hu derech yeshara sheholech ba yagia el tachlis el anachon bli ta'us mimeno. The Seder, what is Seder? It's a method that you will, a straight method that you walk upon in order to get to your tachlis without any straying. So Seder he divides into the first one is called Klali and the second one is Prati. What's Seder HaKlali? Hu Seder Limud Min Limudim. It's the organization of some topics of study. Asher bechukim yuchadim yadrich es ha'adam liyedias echad min ha'chachamot o min ha'malachot. This method utilizes rules, special rules, upon which you lead a person to understand some form of wisdom or malacha. These are the two things he's going to talk about. You should teach people let's say the science of the body, or you're going to teach them how to do grammar. That's two different things. You can study to be a doctor and learn all about the body. That's the wisdom of the body. Or you can teach someone how to do something, like it could be something physical, how to be a carpenter, or it could be something intellectual, how to analyze things in Higayon. So this is what he lays down as the basic ways of presenting information in order to teach someone else. That's called Seder HaKlali. So he says like this. He says like this. Seder limud min limud asher b'chukim yuchudanim yadriches ha'adam l'dias echad min ha'chachmos o min ha'malachas behishalchu min inyanim hakodmin v'yoter nodim el hamoyucharim v'yoter na'almin. Now, he says that the derech yashar, the straight way to teach someone any subject matter, is to go from the items which are previous, hakodmin, vayoter nodim, the ones that are more known, as he's going to say in a minute to explain that, klalim for instance, to the ones which are less known. Okay, so you always want to go from, he's going to say in the middle, from the general rules, and then break those rules down into specific rules. Now, what we're going to do here in learning this chapter is going to see how the Ramchal built the whole Sefer Higayon. So it's like a text about a text, or inside a text. And also, if you understand what the Ramchal has done here, then we'll be able to understand all his svarim and how they're built. We just need one more element here, which will be the Sefer Haliza, which is the next book that we'll do, which is talking about motivation and not just communication. We're talking here in Higayon about communication of ideas, but we have to round that out with motivation, because it's not good enough only to transmit information. You have to also motivate people, like say if you want to motivate them to do mitzvahs and Torah. You can't just tell them, well, it's wonderful to do Torah, God says do Torah. You also have to motivate them and give them the push in order to do it. So here in his Seder Klali, he tells us that the first rule is that you should go from things which are more known and to followed by things which are less known. Perisha, what does that mean? Hakodmim v'yoter nodim hem haklalim. The things that you should start in, or the things that you should first talk about, are the klalim, the general rules, because they're more accessible than all the particular details. Derech mashal, for instance, he says. Hasugim yoter nodim min haminim v'kodem lahem. He says the categories are more known than the subcategories. So you should always really start with your general categories, as he's done throughout the book, and then divide the general categories into subcategories. Okay? Don't start from the bottom of the list of all the pratim. Start from the biggest unit you can get, the broadest category. Break your subject in a few general categories, and then break each one down. It's exactly the format that he's done in the Sefer, and really in all his Sefer. So That's what he says. The sugim ayoter nodim mehaminim b'kodmin lehem. The categories are more known than the subcategories, and therefore they should precede them. The peshutim are more known than the morkavim, which means the elements, the basic elements, are more known than the combination. So we always have to start with, as we've learned before, you always have to start with the basic elements, and then you could start mixing things together. But first you have to know what the basic yesodot are, the basic principles are, and then we will talk about what falls in between those principles. Okay, so like in our Mishnah in Baba Kam, it says the Arba Avos Nazikin, and then it talks about the Tzad HaShava, because the Tzad HaShava is the combination. Once you understand the Arba Avos, then you can start talking about the Tzad HaShava between them, the halachas that will come out through the combination of both of them. So that's where you should go.
More of like talking about a basic principle. So in other words, he's comparing sugim, which is a category, to pshutim, which is like a basic principle. Those are the things that you have to have first. First the category, basic principles, and then you can go from category into the meaning, and you can go from principles into more combined concepts.
Right. The principles into combined principles, right.
Combined,
okay. Or things in between the principles. Okay, exactly. Okay. Ulefi ze belimud hamesudar tzarech sheyagdam limud haklalim el limud hapratim. So therefore, if you want to have proper Seder in your study, you should always start with the general categories and then break them down into the particulars. V'shel peshutim, talk about the simple compounds, and then you build and show the combinations of things. Derech mashal, he'll give some mashalim. In grammar, for instance. Hine techilat tzarich ledaber al ha'osiyos. First you have to teach someone all the letters. V'achar kach hatevos v'nekudos. Then you have to teach them words and the vowelation. V'achar kach al chelkei adiba. Then you have to say, now you understand words, you have to know what the words are. Is this a noun, a shemot, po'olim, v'milot? These are nouns, these verbs. Interesting what the word milot is. After you understand, I think milot is vocabulary. Number 4, after you do that, you then teach them how to put words together and build sentences. Okay, so here's the peshutim. You start with the basic concepts, like the letters. From the letters, you build words. From the words, you build sentences. Okay, so that's what he says the proper way to go. That's why we start with Kamatz Aleph Or, with the alphabet. Although nowadays some people want to start with the words and not with the letters, but he says the best way to do it is to start with the letters and build upwards. Okay, so that's the first type of Seder. The first rule of Seder is that you should go from the general to the particular, from the simple to the complex. Now, Seder also has 2 different types. There's a Seder when you're trying to teach something sichli, intellectual, or ma'asi, or something practical. Okay, he's going to break them up. What does it mean when you're trying to teach someone an intellectual or a practical craft? Sichlihu keshe yisudar chelke echad min halimudim hasichliim ba'ofon sheyedias nose halumid hahu nelech el yedias hatzilosav umehem el havchanas hasugios umehem el haminim. He says when you're teaching someone an intellectual study, so what you should do is first you should say what is the nosei of, what is the subject matter that's involved in this particular area of study. Define it. After that, Nelech el yediyas sibasav, what is the what causes all these different effects in this item. Umehem el havchanas hasugiot, then you have to divide it into categories and make distinctions between each one of the categories. And mehem, after you've done the categories, you go to the minim. You divide each categories into subcategories, and you explain all the parts. So you make yourself a flow chart, as we've seen, and how we start off the class all the time, is a flow chart, because that's the basis of his method of presentation. Okay, not only his, many people use it. Okay, as we said, the Mishnah uses it too when it says Arba Avos Nazikin, and then it goes through all. First it says the general rule is Arba Avos Nazikin, then it tells you the compound parts, and then as the Mishnah in Baba Kama goes on, it tells you the rules of the shore and the rules of the board, etc. Okay, Derech Mashal.
How did you translate Yediyas Sibosa? Knowing their causes?
Yes. What causes? Let's look at the example and see if we can get that better. Okay. He says like this: say you're teaching someone the Chachma of Teva. Chachma of Teva. Now, so the first thing you have to do, b'sechilas yisbora geder haguf. Shuhu osei kachachma hahi. First you have to describe, I think what he means with Teva here is medicine, so you have to explain, you have to define what is the body. Because if we're going to investigate the body, we first have to understand, well, what is it? What's its definition? So that's the nosei. The nosei we're going to be talking about is the body. Achar kach yizbore hasibos hapenimis v'hachitzonis. The internal and external factors which operate on the body. Now, we spoke about siba pinimios and chitzonos. It's easier to understand if you're talking about a physical body. Okay, like if I were to say to you, how do the stars operate? Okay, so you have to know about gravity. That would be a siba. That's a cause that makes these objects fly around in the sky. Okay, that's the cause why it happens. So there's certain internal causes and there's certain external causes, like say a comet will hit a certain body, or there'll be certain explosions that happen through a collision of stars, whatever. But the point is that when you have to explain how what causes these things to move around the heavens. Okay. So you have to get to the principle. I mean, why do all these heavenly bodies move around?
Right, so you're saying that those are the things that are affecting the subject matter. Right. What is affecting the body? Right? What causes the body to work, to operate from the internally and externally?
Right. Right. The food that you need would be an external problem, I suppose, and the internal problems, internally the blood, the various systems that goes on in the breath, blood circulation, whatever. Afterwards, you have to talk about all the different types. I mean, after you understand how the body works, and there's all different variations of bodies. And there's big people, small people, fat people, thin people, whatever different types you can speak about. Dahainu, he says, "Hapashutim hayisodim betchila v'achar kach hamurkavim lefi madrugesam." You have to talk about probably the simple aspects of it. Break it down into its simple parts. The head, the midsection, the legs, and the midsection. You would want to break it down into more subcategories. You have the circulatory system and the breathing system, and you have the lymphatic system. And then when you get into the circulatory system, then you'll start breaking that into more different parts. You'll say that there's the heart, and there's the veins, and there's the arteries, and the capillaries. And then when you get into the heart, you'll say there's 4 parts of the heart, etc., etc., etc. So what you do is you first look at you define the body as its whole, and then you start breaking it into its parts, and then breaking each one of its parts into its subparts. much like he's done here. But let's see what's the difference between this and ma'aseh. Okay, ma'aseh. So that's like, say, if you're studying the human body, okay? So you have to know what makes it work, how does heat, and temperature and environment affect it. That's an external cause. How does proper food help it work? And then you have to break the body down into its different systems and its subsystems. Say you want to teach someone a ma'aseh, how to do something. כשיסדרו חלקי אחד מן הלימודים המלאכתיים באופן זה שמדיעס התכלס נבוא על ידיעס האמצעים המצטרכים להשיגו. When you're teaching someone how to do something, so the first thing you have to do is tell them the tachlis, what's the goal, and then you go from the goal to the means. Very interesting example he's going to give here. Derech Mashal. Look at the example he gives.
Okay.
Higayon.
Thinking.
He's not going to explain to us. He's going to explain to us how he wrote the book. Right? It's called Sefer Higayon. You want to teach someone how to think. Now, I would have thought that thinking is sichli, right?
Right.
That's what I would have thought. But he says no, it's not. It's an activity. Thinking, analyzing in his world is an activity. I think the difference he's making is like if I taught you medicine, I talked you about the human body, so there's a difference between I'm teaching you refuah and I'm teaching you biology. Biology, I'm just teaching you the parts and how they interact. Medicine, then I'll teach you how to heal the body. That would be a ma'asi. But sichli is when I'm just teaching you biology. I'm just teaching the physical anatomy. Okay? That's how I understand the difference. And here you'll see, in Higayon, I would have thought that sichli, but says no, because I'm teaching you how to think. Thinking is an activity. So he says like this, Higayon, Yizbare techila hatachlis. You go from the tachlis, you go from the goal to the means. So for the first thing you have to do is explain what the goal of Higayon is. And he says, Shehu lahav chin hadavorim ba'amitam. He says the goal of logic is to discern things as they are in truth. That's the goal. You want to find the truth about the objects that you come in contact with, whether they're spiritual or physical objects. So once I understand my goal, which is discovery of truth, then I need to know my means. Well, how do I do that? Well, now how am I going to get the Hainu? First you have to explain the terms of Higayon. Right? That's what he did first. He explained to you all the terms, Siba, Suba, Tachlis, Emsa'id, Sug, Min. These are all the terms. Then you teach people about statements, ma'amarim. Then, once you understand statements, then you have to teach them how hekashim work. And finally, the crescendo, you teach them how to do the activity of finding truth by using these items that were just explained. So here is, I think he has a very good sense of humor. I mean, it's not, he says, here he's teaching you how he created the book, right?
Right.
He first told you the tachlis, that just you want to find the truth about things that you behold, that you're involved with. So in order to find truth, you're going to have certain tools. Those are the terms, statements, and hekashim. Now you're going to have to know how to use those tools. So I have to teach you the seder of how to use those tools that I just gave you. And that's really a summary of the whole book. So that's what he says. Yeah, go ahead,
Really
please.
is more like knowledge, and ma'asi is process. When you have to,
yes, very
when
good.
you have to analyze something and discern whether it's true or not, you have to go through a process. And in order to go through that process, you have to have this order. For knowledge, you have to work the other way around. You have to go from the lowest category to and the simple to the highest form. Once you have that knowledge, then you can take that knowledge and apply it to the process, which then goes through figure out what the tachlis is, and then go from the tachlis to the next step.
To the means of getting that tachlis. So I think a good example would be anatomy and medicine, refuah. Anatomy is just sichli, just tells you what the various parts of the body are and what they do. But refuah teaches you, if you learn medicine, it teaches you how to do the activity of healing the body, what medicines to apply, what causes what causes certain diseases, what the name of the diseases are, and things like that. But there you want to heal someone. That's your, so you have to understand what do you want to do. You're not, it's what you want to do is you want to heal this person. Okay, so now what tools do you need? Okay, well, we do need to know about the chachma of the body, but we also have to know about various medicines and how they interact. So yes, process. What was the first word you used?
Just knowledge. Or,
knowledge and process is very good. Yeah, I like that. Knowledge and process. You have to know what it is, and then you have to know what you want to do with it.
It's like trying to
okay, that's it.
The Haggen would be like trying to do a jigsaw puzzle without ever seeing a picture of it beforehand. Right? If you try to do a jigsaw puzzle without seeing the picture, it would be pretty hard to do it. So, you know, you don't know what your goal is.
Right. Right. That's why they give you always a picture on the box.
Right.
Although certain people would rather do it even without the picture, but that's pretty difficult. Okay, so that's what he said. That's what he calls Seder Klali. Okay, learning wisdom. Either the wisdom of what things are, that's what you call knowledge, or the process of doing something, which he calls Maasi. Okay. Now he says we can also divide Seder, excuse me, that's what we did just now, I'm sorry. Yeah. So that was Sichli, Umasi, but let's go back. It's, you know, these subcategories get, because now we're going to do Prati. That was Klali and Prati. Oh, that's right. So he said Klali was how to learn information, okay, or how to do an activity. What's Prati? What's Prati? Prati hu she'adriches ha'adam el yedias eza muskal min muskalos b'frat. The particular form of Seder is going to help us discover a certain particular concept. We're not interested now in presenting the material. We're interested now in the analysis of the material. After we analyze properly, then we will build a proper picture, and then we can present. Much like the Rambam did when he wrote Mishnah Torah. He first analyzed the whole Torah Shebechtav and Torah Shebaal Peh, and then he presented it. Okay, so this second part, Prati, means the investigation of concepts, analyzing concepts, and he's going to break it down into two parts. One is called Hamsa'ah, and one is called Havchana. Hamsa'ah means to find things. It's the creative activity. Okay, he's going to define it, whereas Havchana is analysis. So this is very, very important because we're going to be discussing this in the Kanafication. So let's see how he defines it first as usual, and we'll try to understand it better. Hamsa'ah hu hamsa'ah sagazeres. You want to discover premises or propositions. You want to discover them. Or you want to discover certain syllogisms. And we explained all the rules there of Hekeshim and Mamarim, okay? But now you want to discover things about them. So how do you do it? So he's going to tell us how. This is pretty dramatic stuff. I mean, if he says, you want to now discover a proposition. You're not reading the proposition. You want to now create one. It's the creative aspect. Hamsos gezeres hu havchein benose min hanosim echad min havchanot hachaf aleph sheisbaru lemala. It says like this. To create a preposition, what you have to do is analyze the subject, any subject you're dealing with, by using one of the 21 terms that he explained. Okay, either you're going to go give an example, but you either have to talk about the sebab, this what caused this thing to come into being, what like we said, what made it happen, what destroys it, like in the body, you know, what makes it, what gives it health, what breaks it down. Okay, those are the sebas. You have to divide the body into the parts, etc., etc. So if we use these 21 terms and we apply them to a subject, we'll be able to create new ideas. That's what he says. It's quite dramatic. Perishal, look what he says. I already explained this is a pretty dramatic statement. You hear what he's saying here? He said he discussed above how these 21 terms are the distinction, the general distinctions of all the information that you can possibly apply to a subject in order to create a sentence, in order to say something about the subject or deny something of it. He says, "Umizen nivnos hagazeres." Once you take a subject and you apply one of the, yes, what's the cause? What does it affect? What are its parts? What is its gezerah? You know, what its definition, etc., etc. So once you apply those 21 things to any subject, you'll be able to build a statement. That's what he says. Umizeh, from these 21 terms, when you apply them to a subject, nivnos hagazeros, you create propositions or statements. She'enam ella, all a proposition is, ella ki moshlile ma benose. All a proposition is either saying that something is or is not. Benose has something or does not have something. It's a very small statement, it's very dramatic. He says if you analyze anything, you're going to get to a place where you have to define what are you talking about and what are you affirming or denying of it. And in those affirmations or denials of its subject are spoken about in 21 aspects. You could be talking about the parts of it, the cause of it, what destroys it. That's what he says. V'amnam, and now he's going to go through the many of the 21 anyways. I have here 11 of them. Now because there's doubles all the time. There's sugin min, it's 2 and 2, siba masuba 2 and 2. But anyway, it doesn't matter. He's now going to go through the way you use these, the seder of using these 21 terms and applying it to a subject. Okay? Let's see what he does. Omnam, he says, Haseda haragilim lishmo b'chakiris habechinos elu. What is the seder, he said the word method, I don't know if that's the right word, but how do you go about organizing your investigation of these 21 aspects of a subject? So he says, this is what you do. He said, Abnam HaSeder revealing the usual Seder, B'chakiris Bechinas Elu, Be'ez Nosa Shieh, no matter what you're studying, Kefimashi Pobo Mihem Huzeh. When you're trying to analyze a subject, you should ask yourself not 20 questions, but 21 havchanos. Let's see what he does here. The first one you should say is the Shem. What is the subject here? Hashem, who, you have to define your subject, and it has to be with a noun. It's either miyuchad or mishutaf mushal kiyos v'shaminim Hashem. You have to understand what type of subject you're talking about. Be very clear about it. Is it a specific, in other words, the word or the concept that you're discussing here, is it literal or is it a borrowed term? Okay. as we learned about all the different types of terms before. Okay, you have to be very clear about what you're talking about. If you're talking about a mazik, for instance, okay, it's different talking about a mazik than talking about Eishes Chayil and Mishlei. So you have to be very careful what subject is being presented to you. This is the first thing you have to do, is to define your subject, so that you're not confused. Now, if you notice in the Mishnayos, the first thing that the Gemara always does is clarify terms. Not always, but generally, the first thing you have to do is clarify terms. If you don't clarify your terms, then you can't go further, right? Because you're only going to be talking about how the terms interact, and that is all the predications to the terms. But if you don't know what the term is clearly and what's its gather, so you can't go any further. And we said it's very important to define your terms. If you're analyzing Mishlei, that'll be different than if you're analyzing the Mishnah, for instance. Okay, one will be literal and one will be a mushal. Also, you have to make sure.
What he's saying is the first step is you have to say, what is it? What are we talking about? You know,
what are we talking about exactly? And how are we talking about it? Is it literal? Is it figurative? Right? Is it the derived term? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I find that today's day and age of marketing and advertising, where everything's perception, sometimes you really have to stop and think of what is it really that they're selling, what is it really that they're marketing, and then you come to the conclusion that it's something that's been around for years, or it's nothing, or it's just all smoke and mirrors, and there's nothing really behind it. If you drill down and think, what is it? Identify it, what it really is.
Right. Exactly. This is one of the things that were always difficult in the yeshiva in Chaburas, for instance, because people were not talking on the same point, and although with these tools, you're able to narrow the discussion into one point. Okay, but that's not only the yeshiva. Every discussion is that way. It's called a miscommunication. Okay, but the first thing you have to do is, what are we talking about? Okay, we can't go further than that. Okay, the next thing you're supposed to do after you define your terms, Higayon, you define all the terms of Higayon, the Geder, and you use all these Mashalim, you define. Then you should talk about, he says, the Sug, which is the category. V'yibochen bezeh tachas eisa sug mea esa sugim harishonim yikanes. He says this, remember we had these 10 things? Let's go back to the 10 things. He says after you understand what it is, then you have to ask yourself the following question. Are you talking about at some subject? Or are you talking about something that's happening to a subject? Are you talking about the, kamus? It's mekadesh b'pruta b'sheva pruta, talking about a certain quality. Okay, is it a shur or bor maven hever, or maybe that's better be an action? Okay, or are you talking about an affection? Very interesting. Anyway, I don't want to get. Okay. I asked Rabbi Hyman over Shalom, he left the world. I imagine I know Rabbi Hyman, but he left the world last week. I asked him, I was trying to help him, and I asked him why I say Arbadas Nazikin. So he said to me that a person who's a mazik ends up being a nizak. And there was a lot of thought behind. Then I saw in the weeks in the Rabbeinu Bechaya, in the Parsha of Korach, that when you try to hurt someone, you end up getting hurt yourself. But anyway, that's talking about the terms again. How come a nifal term was used, nazikin, instead of a pula when it said the arba avos? Okay, so you have to define why that term was used. Relationships, time, ketzad, not ketzad, mehimutan karned ashma, okay, kinyonim, place, all these various things. So whatever concept you're talking about, you have to define, well, what is the concept we're talking about in this Mishnah? Are we talking a Kamus concept, like we said, Arbavas Nazikin is the subject here, that there's 4 of them. We're talking about actions or reactions, Mazikin, Nizikin, okay? It doesn't matter. As the Mishnah goes on, we'll talk about what matzah of the animal is when he destroys, etc., etc. But whatever you're discussing, he says that after you understand what it is, then you have to explain these 10 things. First of all, is it an etzem term, or is it something being said about the etzem? And if it's something said about the etzem, he says that there's these 9 possibilities of what we've been talking about, the kamas, eichus, pula, hefel, etc. Okay, so that's what he says to do. Now, in no way
because you have to remember all these by heart in order to be able to you have to become part of your natural thinking.
Yes, and it's a little bit, it's awesome. That's all I could say. As we get more and more into this chapter, it's awesome because it was part of his thinking. And it's lo b'shamayim. Everything he's saying is quite logical. The problem is, as you said, mastering it and then doing it. Okay, it's quite a task.
Right.
Quite
like
a
learning
task.
any skill, you have to learn the steps and then get used to doing it, and then it becomes natural.
Right. Exactly. And the problem always is slowing down, because we want to go fast, because the mind likes to go quickly. I mean, people don't have, and he says in the beginning of Daki Gemara, you have to sit on something 100 times, because thinking takes time. Einstein used to say, I must to think. Thinking takes time.
Right.
I must to think, he used to say.
Right.
I must to think. Thinking takes time, and so what you have to do is slow yourself down, and then also master and apply these principles.
Right.
Okay, you do a lot of it naturally, right? When you're presenting any, for your business, whatever, you naturally do these things. But we have to take it, the whole idea of this book is to take it out of the subconscious and raise it to the conscious level.
Right.
Okay, so he says, the sug. So you have to figure out this concept we're talking about, which one of the 10 concepts is it? Is it talking about an etzem concept, or is it talking one of the mikra? Ki lefi hishtanus hasug yishtana chukav. Depending upon which aspect we're talking about, are we talking about the kamas echos, then the laws will change. As we explained before, which means we have to do a big review. Okay? After I understand my concept, and I understand what type of concept it is, instead of kamas as an echos, then I have to know the sibot. What caused this concept to come into existence? In other words, if we're talking about nazikin, what is the cause? Let's say paying for nazikin. Why do we pay for nazikin? What is the principles behind it that forces us to pay? Then we need the mesubavim, yoter rishumim. And he says what? He says the sibos kulam v'hamusabavim yoter rishumim. You have to know not only the cause of things, but what do they result in? What's the consequence? In Hebrew, I like this word, hashlachot. What is the consequence of them? Okay, if you have an animal that you're supposed to watch, what are the consequences if you don't watch it? And then you have to know all the mischabrim, all the various...
Sibos HaMishabavim here means what this no say is going to cause, and what causes
what causes it, and what does it do?
Okay. So
the simple thing is, if you're teaching someone about making a pot, So we said, well, what are the material causes? What material is it made out of? How is it created? Is it created by a man? Is it created by a machine? And then you want to know, well, what do you use it for? What can you do with the pot? Okay.
Right.
Good. So you have to know what it is, what brings it into existence, and what it does. What's its misubav? What does it do? This thing, or this principle, or this activity. Okay. Then you have to know all the mischabrim, the miyuchadim, the mishutafim, the kodmin, the hamnimshachim, the kol hashar. Then you have to know all the things that are connected to this item, the particular ones, the particular things that this item has, things that this item shares with other things that would precede this item, like we said. Remember, first you have to see the light, and then you can say Kriyat Shema, and then things which are resultant from these items. Then he says, otherwise we could do this, but okay. Then he says you have to create definitions, the Geder, which I would have put first, but he puts it here. I wonder why. Then he says, do the chiluk bechalakim benaim im hanose kol menuim. Then you have to break the subject down into its component parts. If it's one of those things that built of component parts, right? Like we said, if it's a table, a chair, a body, so it's built of component elements. So you have to break down the larger unit, as we said, the body into its particular parts, or the Arbavis Nazikin into its particular parts. There's the shore, and the shore has the Karen, Shin, and Rego, and you have to break it down further. Okay. Then you have to do the chiluk b'minim im hanose b'sugim. If it's a categorical subject, you have to break it down into its subcategories. Then you have to do all the nerachim b'chol kalchehem. You have to say, what is this thing comparable to? Umishtanim, how is this thing different than others? And even you have to say, what's the opposite of this thing? So you have to understand what it is. You have to now compare it to other things and say, well, is it like other things? Is it different than other things? Or is it the opposite of other things? And he says, Shagam yediyas mo'elas harbe livro yediyas hanose. Is a very interesting point here, actually. He says knowing the opposite of the thing is very, very important to understanding, to clarify what the thing is. So you have to know what is a masik and what.
Right. If you know what it isn't, then you know what it is.
Right. We're going to learn this in a few minutes also about this learning from the opposite. But okay, it's very, very important. You have to know what it is and what it isn't. And by knowing those two things, you'll be able to define it much better. Okay, that's what he says. He says that that's our first job. When you're investigating any concept, you have to go through this process of understanding what it is, what's a which aspect you're going to be talking about, what caused it to bring it into existence, what results from it, what are the various attributes of it, the mischabrim, and what's its definitions and its parts, and what is it like, what it's not like, and what its opposites are. That's what he says. Okay, this is how the Rambam wrote the Midah. Okay, so we're having so much fun just trying to analyze one point, but the big people, when they study things, are, after they do the careful analyzation, are able to build a comprehensive unit. Okay, and that's what big people do. But the small people watch the big people. At least we can find out what they're doing. And sometimes we could, in our little local areas, we have to do it too. I mean, if you organize your house, your business, you're always doing these principles anyway. Or you're trying to give a class, you're trying to organize material, you're trying to do it in the best way possible. So you follow these rules, you'll be able to organize your material as clearly as possible.
Right.
So now he says like this, Hams'os Hekeshem. Now you want to, how do you discover syllogisms. Okay, before we were talking about statements, right? Or prepositions. You want to discover a preposition. Now he's going to talk about hekashim. Hamsos hekashim hu hamsos hamofsim lamitasam hagzeros. Oh, I'm sorry. Here he says once you have your statement and you've gone through this process of defining the statement and you've come to a definitive statement, so now you're going to have to prove that the statement is true or false. You've analyzed it and you've said, okay, there are avasazishim. Is it true? Is it not true? So he says, hamsos, and in order to prove things, so he said one of the shimosh, one of the ways that we prove things is by way of solutions, by hekashim. Hamsos hekashim hu hamsos hamofsim lamitam hagzeros. What he means by hamsos, creating these hekashim, is you want to discover proofs to prove the truth of your statements or your propositions. Or, alternatively, you could bring proofs to deny the truth of something. And now he says another key phrase here. He says, umakorohu. He says the source of all the syllogisms is the 21 havchanos shebaharnu. If you want to bring a proof, it's going to come from the 21 different aspects that we explained. Let's see what he says. Pirusho. Ki ein shum hekesh ba'olam shiareh emitis hagazer echas o shiyakoreh shelo yivoled me'echad min havchanos elu. What a statement. He says there's no hekesh, there's no syllogism in the world that comes to prove something, any preposition true, or any one that you will find that doesn't come, its source doesn't come from one of these 21 bechinos. That's what he says. He's going to give an example. And the whole kanaf is going to be about these four things, which is we're going to create statements and proofs, and then we're going to analyze statements and proofs. He's actually going to go through that in that very valuable addendum that we found. Okay, so after we learn a little about this abstractly, he's actually going to do it for us, and then we're going to have to master the concepts and then apply it. Okay, but this is what he says. Derech Mashal.
Pretty bold statement to say that every single hekesh has to come from one of these 21 principles.
Yes, I wouldn't say it, and you wouldn't say it because we couldn't even begin to say it, but he says it. And it is a very, very dramatic statement, very dramatic, which means that we're missing something very big, right? Because we never thought about it this way. But that's what he's saying. The Ramchal here is an unbelievable book. He's creating a system of thought, nothing less and nothing more, in which he holds that it's a complete system that you can analyze anything.
Right.
Now, that's what he says. Derech Mashal, we'll end with the Derech Mashal. Im tiyeh hagzera. Say you created a proposition, right? Shirui lechabed es haTorah kavod gadol. Your proposition is that it's fitting to give a lot of respect to the Torah. Proposition. But now you want to bring a hekesh that proves that proposition, and he's going to show us it's going to be built in one of the 21 bechinos. Let's see how he does it. You'll prove the truth of the statement with the following hekesh. Kol ma sheyit yaches el habori yisparach ra'ui lekavdo kavod gadol. Everything that relates to a Kodesh Baruch Hu, it's fitting to give it a tremendous amount of respect. HaTorah, mit yaches labor olam, the Torah is related to, is from the creator of the universe. Im kain roi lechabed kavod gadol. So there we took the bechina of yachas, a relationship, and we said, how could I prove that you should give a lot of cover to the Torah? So we said, well, since the Torah is related to Hashem, and Hashem you have to give a lot of cover to, you have to give a lot of cover to his Torah also. That's what he says. V'hinei hahekish zeh nolad. So he says that this hekish comes me hamischabrim sheparashti b'makomo. Question of Yachas, from one of the Mechabrim of the Torah, that it is mityaches, the Kodesh Baruch Hu, comes from Hashem. Ki echad hamechabrim haTorah hu hiyos elokis. One of the qualities that we can say about the Torah is that it's divine. Parasho, what does he mean by divine? Mityaches l'borei olam. That's what we mean by divine. We mean that it is from Kodesh Baruch Hu. V'kizeh todin kol hekeshim. Now he says that's the principle. If you can figure this one out, he says to us, then you'll be able to understand all hekeshim. So what he did was he looked for, he has a statement, he wants to prove it, he looks for one of the 21 mischabrim. One of the mischabrim is Yachas, and anything that's Yachas to Kodesh Baruch Hu, and that's it. And then he created his gezerah, his proof. Okay, so we're going to go through the chapter. We're going to go through the kanaf, and we're going to just understand what he says, and then Be'ezrat Hashem we'll be able to slow ourselves down and to capture this creative process while it's happening and look at it. I was, you can learn the times table and you can learn the principles of multiplication. What does multiplication do? There's two ways of doing it. You just memorize the information, or you learn about the principles. So this is the same thing here. What we're doing is learning about the principles of thought, the process of thought. Now the hard thing now is to apply it, but that's what he says. He says that if you understand my 21 principles, you'll see that you'll say one of these processes were being used in creating the syllogism. So we have a lot to do. We have to finish the chapter, and we have to do the 21, and then we'll get a better picture of what he's doing. And then we're going to have to do the hard work of slowing down and applying it. So let's stop at this point. Okay.